In this video, I want to talk to you about how to be prepared for an emergency. Part of, or a large part really, of handling the stress and the feeling of overwhelm that comes with caregiving is actually being prepared. And there's so many unpredictable things in caregiving that you feel like you can't be prepared. But I'm here to tell you there are a few things that you can do to put in your bag of tricks that I always talk about, and you can pull them out when the need arises. So, in the downtime, when things are going smoothly, we don't want to think about what happens in the next crisis. But if we take those down times, the times when things are just, we're riding that wave, if we take those times and we do some precautionary things, we really, really can help ourselves in a time of crisis. So let me give you an example of, I would say, a mini crisis, a little emergency that might occur. Let's say you've made a plan for your loved one to go to the doctors. You can't take them, maybe because of, whatever conflict in your schedule, maybe you are not well yourself, maybe you are at work, whatever the case might be. You make the plan, you have some transportation arranged for them. Then the morning of the doctor's appointment, the transportation doesn't arrive. That can actually feel like an emergency. That can feel like a crisis, right? Because you've gotten your loved one ready mentally, knowing that they're going to go to the doctors and knowing that they're going to go to the doctors, but without you. So, how can we sort of preempt that problem? How can we be proactive in preparing for a situation where there might not be transportation? Well, I call that Plan B. And Plan B can be used for transportation. It can be used if a caregiver is supposed to come into their home and they're not there, they don't come. Plan B can be if meals were planned to be delivered and then the meals aren't delivered for whatever reason. It could be, weather related or whatever. So plan B is just really going through the situation and figuring out if plan A doesn't work, the transportation to take your loved one to a doctor's, then what is plan B? You probably can't be part of plan B because you know that you already have a scheduling conflict. Our caregiver hearts tell us, oh, I got to throw all my plans away and I have to go and I have to take care of my loved one. But if you plan for a plan B, then you don't have to be the one tossing in the towel on all of your scheduled events, and you have some type of backup. So, in the resource section of our membership, I have this form for you. Have a look here. It is called Plan B, right? Now, this is also part of my caregivers planning organizer, our care partner organizer. But notice here, so here's the plan B as work through and decide what is going to happen. So the plan is that, maybe a health worker is going to come and the agency is going to come and visit. And then in the right-hand column is the plan B part. Who should be called if they don't show up? And so we have the name and the phone number. Right? Who is transporting me today? I mean, this is a wonderful document just to even leave for your loved one to look at. I mean, if they're mentally, able to reason through things, then they can actually use this as a reference to help them as well. So who is transporting me today? The name of the person, the agency, their phone number. So if we have to call them to say my transportation hasn't arrived, right there is the information. So right-hand side, who should I call if they don't show? Now, it could be that if you don't have transportation to go to the grocery store, okay, today we're not going to go to the grocery store, right? That's a simple fix. But, a doctor's appointment could be much more serious and you may want to, make sure they make that appointment. So, could there be a neighbor? Is there another agency? Do you know that that agency for transportation has given you a number to call in the case somebody doesn't show up? Right. So, this is where we keep that information. Now, just always to have with us here is contact information at the bottom of this form. Super helpful, especially if like a caregiver is coming in to, help out, sit with your loved one, maybe do some light housekeeping or something like that. Here's a space for you for three contact members. And is it a family member, is it a friend, are they from an agency that helps out? That contact information can be invaluable for whoever might be with your loved one or for your loved one themselves, if they are able to handle that information and have some reasoning to be able to solve some problems on their own. All right, so let's move to a true emergency. I mean, not that transportation to a doctor's is not an emergency. Like I said, it certainly can raise your anxiety. You plan something out, you have somebody helping you out, and then it falls through, right? But plan B will help you with that. But let's go to an emergency in which maybe paramedics or an ambulance needs to be called. All right, so this can apply to if they are living alone. It can apply to if they are living in your home. And it can apply to if there is an emergency. And even if you are there, this strategy, this message will really help you because I can speak from firsthand experience. When my father lost consciousness after coming up a flight of stairs, I didn't know what to do. I didn't realize that he literally had run out of oxygen in his oxygen tank. It was the first time I had ever experienced it. He collapsed, and I just immediately picked up the phone to call 911. And then your mind is scattered and you're not sure what to say. I mean, I remember him slumped over in the kitchen chair, and the phone was on the wall. It was cordless, but it was still on the wall, and I was literally holding him up, but I had to get to the phone. And that power of adrenaline in an emergency situation, I like bear hugged him from behind with the chair and pulled him and the chair toward the wall so I could like pick up the phone, right? But I mean, your mind is going in a million different directions, trying to figure out how to make sense of this and give the correct information. So here is a method I have to help you if you're present, to help the EMTs if you're not present. I call this the EMT envelope. Okay, so here's a picture. So get any kind of a envelope, a big colorful envelope. Okay, now you're gonna have to assess, because we're gonna put all the important information in this envelope. So you're gonna have to assess your loved one, right? My mother, as she dealt with dementia, if she saw a big colorful envelope, taped above the front door, she would have taken it down and hid it for safekeeping, right? And then we would never have been able to find it, right? You might, take this big colorful envelope and put it on the refrigerator, right? Or above the refrigerator where it can be seen. If your loved one spends a lot of time in their bed, because they're bedridden or that's just where they spend the majority of the day, you could tape it on the wall behind them, right? You could put it near the recliner if that's where they spend the majority of their time, or tape it on the wall behind the recliner and put EMT on it. They will see it. So let's talk about what we're going to do here, right? So we're going to put it someplace where it can be seen. And when our minds, even if we're present, our minds are, swirling around because of this emergency, we can pull down this envelope, and inside it is going to be the information to help us answer the questions that the emergency personnel are going to ask us. So what are we going to put in the envelope? Well, we're going to put the emergency contact information, right? Who to call. So that could be you, that could be a neighbor, that could be, close relative, whatever it is. Who do we call if there is an emergency? The first thing that EMTs are going to ask is they're going to ask about medical information. So we're going to put the medical information in this envelope. That's going to be our list of doctors, list of medications they're always going to ask for. I mean, even if you ask me for my list of medications in a non-stressful situation, I might forget something. So putting that down is really important. And even putting like the dosages, right? How many milligrams or whatever it is that they're taking can be really important in figuring out what is wrong with your loved one. And of course, a list of any kind of medical issues that they might have. This could play into, them understanding your loved one better and the situation that they are in. Noting if your loved one has dementia is super important. And then they know, well, they can ask them questions, but they might not be able to, count on their answers 100% as they're trying to figure out what is going on. Now, also including in there a photocopy of medical cards, an ID, even if it's an expired driver's license, it still identifies who they are. I mean, so imagine, that they call 911 or you can't get a hold of your loved one. And so you call 911, right? They might get there and not know the name of your loved one. So having that photo ID can be really important. Any kind of advanced directives put in there is super important. So I know, when my father was on hospice care, he had a fall actually, and our first response was to call 911. Right? And, it's important to know what the advanced directives are. They need to know how far they can go in caring for your loved one. And then, of course, to have power of attorney in there is really important so that they know who could be the person that is helping to make important information or to make important decisions, right, with the information. So, in the resource section of our membership, I give you a copy of this emergency form, right? I've made it bright yellow. If you print it out in color, or if you take the file to someplace like Staples or whatever, and they'll print it for you in color, it'll be bright yellow, right? So that it can be found and it doesn't get mixed up in other paperwork that might be laying on the table. It's going to really stick out. And this will be a place for you to put all of that information well organized and easy for the EMT to see and to understand. Okay. So, think about your situation with your loved one. Where would be the best place? You might adapt this in some way that works best for you and for your situation. But it can really help in those stressful times when so much is happening that your mind could go blank. And right there you have the paperwork. So whether you're present or whether you're not present, the EMT envelope can really help. So let's talk about, okay, let's take that one step further in that you've called the ambulance. They're probably headed to the emergency room. So let's take it a step further and you're at the emergency room, or you've been called to, know that your loved one is headed to the emergency room. This could be a call from a care facility saying that there are, sending your loved one to an emergency room. Happened to me many, many times. Why it always seemed to happen at night, I don't know. Right? Even when you're, less with it mentally, and you're pretty drained. I mean, I remember one of the last times, more serious times, the care facility called to tell me that my mother was being taken to the emergency room. I had literally just walked through the door from work, and it was late. I was coming home late. I walked in. I still was carrying my briefcase. The phone's ringing. I pick it up. They're telling me she's in the emergency room, or headed, anyways, to the emergency room, a 40-minute drive for me. I put down my briefcase. I picked up my purse and just went out the door. I mean, it was just, you know, it's what happens. Like sometimes we get into the cycle of ending up in the emergency room. Well, what can you do to help relieve the stress from that kind of a phone call, knowing that you're headed to the emergency room? Well, I call it the ER confidence bag. So think about, right, the pregnant woman who's getting close to having her baby, and she, makes the hospital bag and puts everything in there that she wants to take to the hospital. And they put it near the front door for the time that, labor is going to set in. Same concept, right? Create a bag that is, solely for this situation. And we put in it some of these things that you're going to need. And so many times we just rush out the door and go to the emergency room, and we get there and then they have 100 questions for us and we don't have what we need. So listed here are some of the things: copies of the insurance card, power of attorney, um, advanced directives, the list of medications, right? Sounds kind of familiar from that EMT envelope. Again, we can just pull that down off the wall and take it with us, right? We can hand it to the emergency personnel, but we might need it ourselves at the emergency room. So have another copy that's going to go into your ER confidence bag. A list of people to contact, right, when you are there. Here's a really good one: cell phone charger, right? Like that night I rushed out of the house. I hadn't charged my phone. It had been with me all day. Having a cell phone charger would have been great. I went to the gift shop and I bought one, right? But put a dedicated one that stays in your bag, and then you're always going to be prepared. Tissues or even paper towels, right? If you're the person that's transporting your loved one to the emergency room, you might need those wet wipes, right? You get there, you might want to wipe down the tray that is there. Your loved one might need extra underwear. Maybe they're going to stay. And so they might need a few things. Extra underwear could be some of those things. The slipper socks, those that have the anti-skid on the bottom, can be really helpful. Personal hygiene items, whether it be, Depends or pads or, whatever that you might need. A gallon-sized baggies to collect anything that is soiled, right? Or you could put things in it like dentures and glasses and wristwatch. I don't know, whatever they might have, it would be a good place to contain them. Spare change that you might need for vending machines or parking meters or valet for a tip. I know a local emergency room has valet parking because you come running in there. So you're able to tip them, and that could be really helpful. Is it just me, or is the emergency room always cold? Right? So having an extra sweater, whether it is for you or for your loved one, that would be really good. I know several instances when my mother was taken from the care facility to the emergency room, they just kind of bundle them up in the sheets that they have on the gurney and take her away. And I would be the one bringing her home at night, and she didn't have a coat, she didn't have, a sweater, she didn't have anything, right? And they were just, gonna send her out in the cold with me. So having an extra sweater, even a rolled up blanket or a throw. I mean, even though they give you a sheet, and sometimes they'll even give you the warm blankets, but then they get cold and then there's a draft, and maybe a rolled blanket could go good behind the neck when you're laying in the gurney in the emergency room, right? All of these things can be helpful. A comb, it could help again, especially if they are staying over. You might want earbuds or headphones for yourself. You might have a long wait. Any kind of candy or gum could be helpful, healthy snacks. And, change those out every 6 months if you put them in your bag. Remember, this is dedicated, so whatever we put in this bag, it's gonna stay in the bag. We don't wanna take anything from it because we wanna be prepared when we go to the emergency room. And you might want to have a copy of any important passwords that you might need. If it's your spouse, you might need passwords for banking accounts and online things. So important passwords might be helpful. It might help you be able to answer questions or something in the emergency room. So the ER confidence bag, you can keep it at home, you can keep it in the trunk of your car, whatever, wherever, just so you and anybody else that's going to meet you at the emergency room would know where to pick it up. Let's talk about a crisis or an emergency that we really might not give much thought to until it actually happens. And that is weather related emergencies. I found myself in quite a pickle with my parents in a pretty big snowstorm. I live 40 minutes away from them, and it was bad enough that I couldn't get to them. And my father was on oxygen, and they lost power, which meant they lost some heat, and it was not a very good situation. So I want you to learn from my mistakes so that you're prepared. Again, being prepared helps relieve the stress and the overwhelm. So, first things first is you want to sign up for weather alerts, right? So, you could be caregiving from afar. I was 40 minutes away, but you could be a state away. You could be half the country away and still be able to prepare and to help them. If you have a loved one who is on oxygen, you want to call your electric company and report that. They have a list, and those are the houses and the areas that they try to help first. At least that's what they tell me. But, it seemed to work out. So, one more level of some kind of support to help you out. So, make a plan for the power outages or snowstorms or floods or tornadoes, right? Make a plan for what you are going to do. Are you going to remove them from the situation? So if they live in their own house, are you going to bring them to your house? Is there shelters nearby? Are they going to go with a neighbor and the neighbor is going to help them, right? If they are in your house, what is your plan for your house? What's your plan for if you are there? What is your plan if you are not there, but they are there alone, right? So make the plan. What are the resources that are available in the community? Are there warming stations, right? Are there places for if it's extreme heat and the power goes out, right? The brownouts with the extreme heat. Are there opposite of warming stations, right? Are there cooling stations where you can get water and hydration? So important for our loved one, whether they are, elderly or whether they are suffering from some sort of illness. Hydration is always so important in any situation. So we can find that out. Also learning about just the neighborhood evacuation procedures. If it is because of power outages, lines down, if it is because of flooding, right? How do they get your loved one out of the neighborhood if they need to be out of the neighborhood? So, the most important thing, so I'm going to share this with you here. This also can be found in the resource section of our membership. is the emergency plan. This sort of helps you walk through it a little bit, put it down on paper, right? List those who help if I evacuate, their contact information, where will I go, right? I have given a copy of my emergency plan too, right? Who has the plan, right? Emergency plans are not helpful if nobody has the plan, if you're the only one holding it, right? So we have to make sure that we share the plan. So, super quick story. My parents lost power. It was in the winter, bad, bad winds and ice, power lines. So they end up, the emergency people ended up fixing the power on the street where my parents lived, but my parents' house didn't get power. And it was like, are they understanding? Are they not understanding? What is going on? I live 40 minutes away. It was even worse where I lived. My husband worked in between our house and my parents' house. So after work, he drove on up to see them and goes in the house to find them sitting there in the kitchen, no power, with the gas on the stove and the oven door open to get more heat. My father was on oxygen. I mean, that talk about a terrible combination of gas and oxygen. And the really horrifying part is, in my father's younger years, he was a plumbing contractor. He knows very well what would happen with having gas turned on and having oxygen, something flammable like that. But in a crisis situation, they weren't thinking, right? And my husband ended up taking them to a local hotel because it was too dangerous to drive them as far as my place, and then to be able to get them back, and we still had to work, and the safest thing was a hotel because they could take care of themselves, but they just didn't have the problem solving skills, and they shouldn't be driving, right? So he drove them. My mother had a parakeet. They took the bird out. I can't believe the bird survived the cold temperatures, but they wrapped him up in a heavy blanket and they took them out, right? And they, took all the bottles of oxygen that my father had needed. And at that time, I don't believe he had his concentrator. He hadn't progressed that far yet in his disease. But I mean, it literally took me and my two brothers who are out of town calling my parents to convince them to go with my husband, right? They just couldn't understand the concept of leaving the house. To them, that was safety, but that wasn't safety, right? If they would have had one more night in that house, I don't think they would have survived it. It was just too cold for them. So having a plan, making sure people know the plan, right, is going to be helpful. And let me tell you, that was extremely stressful in worrying about my parents, and then also just trying to get them to commit to the plan to go to the hotel with my husband. Yeah. Okay, so last thing I want to share here with you is a disaster kit, whether we're talking hurricane, tornado, bad storm, or the cold. A disaster kit to be have put together and to be prepared and to be in a location where either you or your loved one can get to it can be very helpful. So here's a list of some things, and my recommendation would be to put all of these things in something like a rubber made container like I have pictured here, that is safe from moisture. It like can snap shut so no critters can get into it, because once again, this is going to be one of those things that you put together and you keep it, right? You don't take anything out of it. You put it together and you keep it. So in there would be a 7-day supply of medication, all medication. So it might need to be updated, as you go through time. An additional copy of the EMT envelope, right? So all of that important information is in there. A supply of water for 1 week or more. So these might not all fit in the container. It could sit on top of the container if you buy jugs of water. Some non-perishable food, easy open things, a manual can opener because you might be without power, a flashlight or battery operated lights. Of course, you might want to toss in there extra batteries, or you might want to test the things every so many months. You could test them at the same time you change batteries in the fire alarms within your house. Put a first aid kit in there. Something could happen and you get cut, and you want to make sure that you have the ointment to put on it for antibacterial. Cell phone charger, right? And you might say, well, what if I'm without power? Well, you could be without power, but what if you went someplace that would have power? This would be in there. It would not be wet. You could take it with you. Put wet wipes in there, like that large tub size that you could use for several days to clean up. Underwear, depends, anti-skid socks, right? If things get wet, so that you're able to have something that is dry. Again, clothing to make sure that it is dry. It could be big, it could be bulky, it could be warm, it could be cool, whatever works for your environment, to be able to put in there. Emergency situations, crisis situations, if you can be proactive and have things ready, some of the stress can be diminished. You will feel better knowing that you could say to your loved one, go to the blue container that sits under the sink in the kitchen, or wherever you happen to keep it, or in the garage, or, wherever you keep it, and let them, know that they can get in there, right? And they can use those items until help gets to them, right? But this could be something that could be really helpful. Again, a list of this disaster kit is located in the resource section of your membership. So it is there and it is available to you. All right. I hope that you found this helpful. I hope, it's not too much coming to you at once, but little by little, you can work on some of these things to put these ideas into place. And trust me, at the time of the emergency, you're going to be glad that you were prepared in this way.